Hi,
Hello.
Galina. Hi, how are you?
Hi. Good. Can you see me okay? How are
Yes,
you?
I can. Good. How about yourself?
Good. Just running in between meetings.
I know it's
But
almost crazier with all the Zoom meetings.
I know I actually have more meetings. I have more emails. I am not sure that I'm more productive. That's a different thing. But
Yeah,
thank God it's Friday. At least we
I
don't have to do
know.
Zoom meetings on the weekend.
I know. Yeah, I've been totally slammed just with the number of meetings that people have been scheduling. I'm like, let's not talk over Zoom. Let's talk over email. And then if we need to, let's do Zoom.
Exactly. It is very taxing, actually. It is very taxing just overall.
Yeah,
So
definitely. Yeah. So I figure we'll wait until 12 to let people into the meeting. This is going to be interesting just because we have so many people who are really excited about coming to the event. But I figure we'll just let you kind of share kind of some of your high level learnings at the
Mhm.
beginning of the event. Um, you talk as long as you need to, and then just when you're ready, we can start doing Q&A. I'll invite people to either leave their questions in the chat and I can kind of relay them, or people can unmute and ask their questions of you directly.
Makes sense. And I thanks for sending the earlier questions. I've
Of
actually
course.
incorporated some of those kind of in my
Perfect.
10 minutes or so intro, 10-15 minutes of intro. So yeah,
Nice.
it should be a good discussion.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. Hold on, I'm going to open this door really quickly so it doesn't look weird. I'm excited about it too. And thank you again for doing this. It should be, we've had like just a lot of people who are looking for information, and it's so
Mhm.
exciting to be able to like connect them with people like yourself who really have the expertise and know what they're talking
Well, I
about.
just have my experiences, but that's all I have. But hopefully
Definitely.
that helps to provide some perspective. Have you been running those kind of webinars for a while, or you just started now because of the coronavirus situation?
We just started. So I'm actually, my role is really around community building and
Mm-hmm.
kind of fostering connection between people who are part of our organization, either through programming or something else. But we really wanted to provide resources for founders. And so that's when we started spinning up the digital programming. And also we had been very much planning programming like in real life events, which all got
Yeah.
canceled because of this. So that's why we started doing it. But we've had really good reception from people. We've been playing around. So this is like the Zoom just meeting format. And we are now thinking about doing some things that are webinars. So it's just
Mm-hmm.
the presenters who are visible on the screen. So we'll see how it goes with the different formats. But yeah.
Right. No, the engagement is really important. I mean, because I think especially a lot of folks that are going through this for the first time, it must be really scary for them.
Yeah.
I've been on some other webinars with like VCs and stuff like that, and it's just like everyone's kind of painting a really bleak picture, which it's like it's not a good situation to be in, but of course
Yeah,
there's always opportunity in crisis. So
definitely. Yeah, and that's the main thing that I found really interesting is that we're also trying to like, yes, we need to be realistic about things, but also
mhm.
like there is opportunity that comes from crisis, like looking at the last round of companies that were founded during the financial crisis
Yeah,
and kind of using those as examples and like reminders to remember that not everything is the end of the world. So
yeah.
yeah, great. So I'll start adding people in. Let's see, make my window smaller. Great. Let's see. Hello, welcome everyone. We're gonna get started in a couple of minutes, just waiting for more people to join. Let's see. Hope everyone is enjoying the sun. Well, at least here in the sun is in California, in the Bay Area. I don't know what it's like for the rest of the country. I think we're gonna get rain this weekend, which is kind of unfortunate though. Welcome. We're just letting more people in. We'll get going in a couple of minutes, everyone. And welcome to use your video if we want to see your lovely faces as well. I know I've had a lot of Zoom meetings, so I can understand if
Yeah.
people.
Video is definitely encouraged. I like seeing people as well.
Yeah. And also, if you want to introduce yourselves in the chat, feel free to. It's always great to get a sense of who is on the call. If you have any questions as well, that we can help frame the conversation too. Ooh, I like that background. It's great. That's where I want to be, Camilla, is on the water.
Yeah. I pulled them up last night. I thought, what the hell? Let's enjoy it.
We should.
So I'm Camilla.
Welcome.
Hi, Camilla. I'm Galina. Hi. Good to meet you.
Hi, Galina, Katie, Lena, Christine, Macy, Marcy.
I see Christine just introduced herself. She's the CEO of Codalicious. Welcome.
That's a good name for a company.
I like that. Great. Just giving people a couple more minutes to join. I don't know if you all have been in back-to-back Zoom meetings, but I actually find it more difficult to jump from one to the other than real
more
meetings.
Stressful, so. That's for sure. And this is going to be a good kind of small circle with probably 15 to 20 people, so it will allow for better conversation and discussion.
Let's see. Okay, I'll give people one more minute and then we can get going. Great. Okay. Well, we'll let people join in as they can. But welcome, everyone. We're really excited to have you here on this call. I know the times are uncertain, but this is really a time, I think, to step up and form community. There's no better time to really lean on one another and help one another during this time. I'm Katie from Allraise. I run all of our digital community and digital programming now. Really excited to have you on the call. We're also very excited to have Galina sharing some of her expertise and experience today as well. I just wanted to go through a couple of housekeeping things. As Galina mentioned, this is going to be a conversation and also just really kind of, sorry, I'm also letting people into the room. A conversation around comms, specifically for B2B and enterprise companies. How do you navigate talking to different stakeholders, communicating effectively? But we also want this to be a conversation. So Galina will go into a little bit of her just like background, some of her high-level learnings, and then we'll open it up for conversation and questions. If you have questions during Galina's talk, feel free to put them into the chat function down at the bottom of the screen. I'll be moderating that at that time. And we also encourage, we encourage you to put your video on if you want. I'm in quarantine clothes, but some of you might look better or not, but this is really an open space. Also, we are asking that people mute themselves when Galina is talking, just so that we don't have a lot of echo or background noise, but you can unmute when we start the conversation. Another tip, if you're on your computer, there's a gallery or grid view when we move to the discussion part, and you can see everybody who is in the call as well. I think that's it for housekeeping. So Galina, I'll let you take it from here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So first of all, good to meet you all virtually. I wish you would have been under better circumstances as we're all stuck at home. But at least I put on makeup today, so I feel a little bit better. I tried to do that just to kind of lighten up the situation. So thank you so much to Katie and to Allraise for kind of putting us together as a community. I think that during those challenging times, it's extremely important, especially because we can't see each other and we can't meet in person, to kind of have those communications and to help each other to kind of share the experiences that we've had. And even though they've invited me today to share my experiences, this is really meant to be a discussion. Your experiences are much more collectively than mine. So what I'm going to do today is just kind of talk a little bit from my experiences and the conclusions of what my company and myself specifically are doing through this crisis, and also what I've learned through my experiences of creating my company and running it for the last 5 years. So a bit of background around on myself. My path to entrepreneurship actually was not a very straightforward one. So I know that probably a lot of you are just straight out of college maybe and started their first company. For me, actually, I had a bunch of corporate jobs before I actually started Claroty 5 years ago. And that took me around the world. I've lived in 7 countries and 4 continents, so really kind of have that global experience. And my first actual experience with entrepreneurship was creating a startup within another very large company, $100 billion company called Siemens. They're one of the largest automation vendors. And I was just kind of lucky enough to get hired into a CEO program that was basically had the intention of teaching or kind of giving practical experiences to young executives that are on their path to a CEO. And so through that experience, had the opportunity to start a new business at Siemens. As timing would have it, it was just basically during those times that Siemens was transitioning from being a very kind of automation heavy industrial company to be a much more cybersecurity digitalized company. And so that was an opportunity, given my background, to create a new business for Siemens. So I did that for about 3 years, and through that corporate experience, I actually learned what it's like to sell to enterprise customers. I know that today we're going to focus a lot on the B2B and the enterprise customers, and I would love to hear later on during the comments from you if you're running enterprise businesses or consumer businesses. A lot of what I'll talk about in terms of the communication is relevant to any kind of startup, but the emphasis definitely will be to on B2B and enterprise, because this is what I've done and this is what I understand well. So in a nutshell, after doing that startup at Siemens for about 3 years, which was a very interesting experience because you get capital, but you're actually also getting quite a lot of the overhead costs from a very large organization. So it's very different than taking money from a VC. After doing that for 3 years, I basically decided, I saw an opportunity. I was talking to a lot of customers, a lot of strategic partners, and saw an opportunity to create a new technology within industrial cybersecurity, which is cybersecurity for critical infrastructure. And so left Siemens and started Claroty 5 years ago. To date, we have raised $100 million. So the business is very heavy B2B. Enterprise sale. We basically sell to the largest oil and gas companies, manufacturing companies. So we have customers the likes of Chevron and Pfizer, really a lot of the Fortune 500s. We're about 200 people right now. So as you can imagine, very, very heavy burn rate as we're going through these times of crisis. And I'll talk about at various points how we're handling the crisis and how that might apply to the enterprises that you're running. So with that, I want to focus on 3 main aspects of kind of stakeholders that you're communicating to during this crisis and in general. The first one is obviously your employees, which are the folks on the front lines that are making magic happen for you and for the customers. The second is your board of directors, and the third are actually the customers. So feel free, by the way, to interrupt and raise questions. We received a lot of great questions, about 12 questions, and I've tried to incorporate those in the narrative that I've put together for the next 10 minutes or so. But please, by all means, feel free to jump in if something is very relevant to the startup that you have. So with that, before we talk about communication to employees, I actually want to mention that in my experience and from all the conversations that I'm having with my friends also that are in similar situations, the most important aspect has actually been managing our own psychology as leaders, right? Before we get into any of the communications to the different stakeholder groups. It makes a huge difference whether you're approaching this crisis with a clear thinking and with a clear head versus if you're just in a panic mode. Obviously, we're bombarded with like lots of messages from the media, from our investors, from customers, employees. Everyone is panicking, and I think that as leaders, if we kind of portray that message also of panic, that is just making the problem that much worse, right? So I have an anecdote that I like to share with my team as well, which is, you know, there's a reason on the plane they always tell you in case of emergency, make sure that you use your own oxygen mask. And that's really the first message that I want to leave you with, is make sure that you take a moment, you address your own psychology, do whatever you need to do, talk to your friends, you know, cry, whatever emotional response you want to have. But at the end of the day, collect yourself and really realize that there are a lot of things that you don't control, right? We don't control the markets. We don't control how much money will be available through the VCs and all of that other stuff. We don't control the virus. And the markets will not judge you on the things that you cannot control. The markets will judge you on the things that you can control. And so even if your sales are down 50% for the year and you have to lay off staff, as long as your metrics are better than your competitors, you're still doing better, because the playing field is kind of even for everyone. So that's, I can't really stress that enough, just having your own psychology and kind of thinking clearly about the challenges, but also the opportunities ahead. So with that in mind, the second most important thing, and what we've been doing specifically at Claroty for almost a month now since that crisis started, is decide on what you're going to communicate and be very, very concrete in that communication. So I'll give you an example. From my own personal experiences and other friends that I have in the industry, in such market conditions of a downturn, and really we haven't had one of those for the last almost 12 years, it is really, really important to overreact. So the market will punish you a lot more if you underreact in the long term versus if you actually overreact. Why is that? So no one knows the extent of the crisis, but based on all the indicators that we're seeing, we know that it will be a pretty deep one, right? And so if you don't take dramatic measures right away, you would have to keep on changing the story of how you're addressing the situation every few days, right? And so that in addition to obviously changing of the plans, this kind of undermines also your authority in front of the team. So in my experience, it's better just to assume that things will be really, really bad and take the defensive moves that will allow you to stay in business for as long as possible. A lot of what's happening right now is the name of the game is just stay in business for as long as possible, right? You guys will find a way to pivot. You will find a way to make your businesses successful, but you have to be in the game in order to have a chance of succeeding. So take a very hard look of your financials and your burn rate, and just kind of whatever has been borderline for cutting, now is a good opportunity to actually use this crisis as an excuse to say, look, this is what we have to cut, right? So this is in terms of like communicating to the team. You have to be very transparent with them, and you know, there's no point in my experiences of hiding things like, this is how much money we have left in the bank, this is our burn rate. It just kind of gives them the first of all, it makes them part of the team, and it makes them realize that that you're actually that you have them, that they understand how severe the situation is, that you're not hiding things from them. But it also makes them feel that they have more ownership in this, right? So once you've kind of given them the brutal truth, so to speak, without sugarcoating, and you've taken care of the defensive moves of like, what can we cut, where can we cut, how fast can we cut, then you can have clarity with you and the team to think about what are the offensive moves, right? So cutting, postponing hiring and all of that, this is all defense. But in those times of crisis, it's actually a good opportunity to rethink what are additional revenue streams that I could have perhaps in a different segment that I have not thought about, or that segment was not interesting enough in the past because they just the economics were not working out. But now when everyone's working from home, this might be a different situation. So I'll give you one example from my own business. So my company provides a platform of various different products that are related to critical infrastructure networks, right? It's all related to cybersecurity. But we had one of those products was secure remote access. And that was always just kind of like an add-on for customers that, you know, they might be interested in it, maybe they're not. Well, during these crazy times when everyone, including a lot of the engineering, is working from home, that actually became a leading proposition. So we had to kind of quickly repackage that product and say, hey, customers, this is what we're actually leading with. This is what we have. Don't worry about contracts and all of that crazy stuff. We can just implement the solution within a matter of days and then get you going. We'll think about the financials later on. So the crisis also presents an opportunity, but if you want to have the collective kind of wisdom of your team needs to be calm enough to know that you know, our leader is telling us the truth. They're not bullshitting us. We know exactly what the financial situation of the company is. And we know that if we pull our minds together, we'll actually be able to come up with things that will help us to extend the runway that we have. So those are my reflections around communicating to the team. And I really strongly suggest that you start with that, because if you start communicating externally before the team kind of knows what the situation is, that could create some challenges. So I'll pause here and see if there are any questions related to the employee communication.
I see.
Feel free to speak up. If not,
Yeah,
I'm seeing some questions here. Yeah, I'm seeing some questions here in the sidebar. I suggest we take those at the end if they're not specific to the employee portion. If not, I'll just keep on going. Okay. So let's move on to communicating to the board. So for those of you, how do you address productivity with the team? Yeah, a very good question from Christine. Thank you, Christine. So productivity is all about engagement in my experience. And I actually, you know, even though we don't have commute time and we're not flying and all of that, I actually think that everyone's productivity is negatively impacted by actually staying at home, judging by myself and my team. So the first thing to do is first of all, acknowledge that, okay? We're all going through like tremendous stress right now. Everything is just kind of upside down. We have kids to take care of, parents, whatnot. So just acknowledge that and ask the team to really take a pause. Tell them that it's okay to take a pause, reestablish their priorities. And it doesn't mean that they have to have, you know, 10 hours of Zoom calls. That's kind of the conversation that I've been having with my team, is like, this is stressful times. Take all the time that you need to do whatever else in the house you need to take care of. But when you're at work, just like really try to take care of like the most important things. And so that's one thing in terms of communication. The second thing that we've done is we now have like meetings, at least 2, 3, 4 meetings with different kind of slices of the company a week, where it's a purely a social call. We don't talk about work, you know, we talk about the shows that we're watching and whatnot, but it really feels like, okay, we went for dinner, we did something social. It really helps to kind of bring the anxiety down. So, you know, not rocket science, but those are the 2 practical things that I've been looking at. And secondly, just because we're at a crisis doesn't mean that all the OKRs go through the window, right? It's like you still have your check-in points. Have compassion for the fact that, especially for the sales organization, they might not be hitting their targets, but at the end of the day, we still have OKRs. And as soon as you revise the OKRs to reflect the crisis situation, then the team is still accountable for delivering what they promised. Okay, so with that, let's talk a little bit about communicating to the board. I have to say, you know, when I started Claroty and we raised our first round of financing, and that was a pretty large Series A. We raised $26 million of Series A. For the first, I have to say, for the first, you know, 2, 3 board meetings, I was viewing the board as kind of like a child-parent relationship where I have to account for what we've done, you know, what progress we've done, and really just kind of like a reporting structure. And that was just my own kind of blind spot, right? What I came to realize, thanks to the fact that I have amazing board members, is that the board is actually there to work for you, right? Especially in times of crisis. So they made a lot of promises to you, probably as they were chasing you during the fundraising process. They promised that they'll help in good times and in bad times. It really is like a marriage. So you guys are stuck together. They're on the cap table for a really long time. So the first thing that I would say is it's a good benchmark to see whether your investors are proactively reaching out to you for help, right? So that's like the first kind of small orientation that you have if they're good investors or not. But really, irrespective of that, I would say reach out to them for help. They have a lot of different viewpoints because of all the different portfolio companies that they have. And they have much more accumulated wisdom, right? Whatever that's just best practices in go-to-market, how to address pricing during a crisis. So I would really look to the board as a resource, not so much as, you know, spinning the story or spinning the reality or trying to justify why the numbers are not good. This is the market situation. There's nothing we can do about the market itself. But what we can do is be better relative to the competition. And this is where your advisors come into play. So typically, for those of you that have raised at least round A, you would probably have at least a couple of different people on the board with different expertise. Reach out to them for kind of in-depth debriefing sessions on this is the situation, this is what we're thinking in terms of offensive moves. What do you think? What are you seeing in your other portfolio companies, right? Secondly, give them the clear picture of the numbers. Build scenarios, that helps a lot. Working only with the worst case scenario is also not helpful because you could change things in your approach that potentially could result in better scenarios. So it's really important that you build scenarios that take into consideration the market dynamics, but also what you can influence on top of the market dynamics. And if you come to the conclusion that you just simply will not have enough runway, you should ask them upfront whether they will make a commitment to continue to finance you during those difficult times. Many of the good VCs will do that, whether that's with bridge loans or whether that's a down round, whatever it is. But it's also a good sign that you have a good investor on your side if they have a commitment to finance you. Because at the end of the day, the fundamentals of your business have not changed. You still have a certain opportunity. The actual acceleration or conversion might have changed because of the overall market dynamics, but you still, the basics of your business should still be sound. And I have to say, you know, from all of my VC friends that I have, all of them are 100% right now busy with helping their existing portfolio companies. So you should actually be able to get a lot more attention from them than at any other time. And again, it's a really good sign if your VC proactively reached out to help. So bottom line, keep them, use them, actually not keep them, but actually proactively use them as a resource because those are your partners. There was one question that we received earlier on how to that is relevant to this section, how to communicate a positive pivot during a crisis. So first of all, I think that pivots are always positive. I mean, and it's not a spin, it's really a reality because a pivot means that you have learned something about the market, right? You have more knowledge now. And so ideally the new knowledge that you now have will make the next iteration of your business model to be more successful, right? So the way I would communicate that to the board is, first of all, be able to articulate exactly what is it that you learned, and secondly, how what you learned will help you to be better positioned for the second iteration of the business model. But really, iterations are expected. There is no static business, so this is something that boards are used to, and I personally always see a pivot as a positive learning curve. I'm going to pause here and see if there are any questions on that board portion of communicating to the board. I assume most of you have boards already, or at that stage where you've raised some funds and you have boards. Okay. Good. So if no questions on the board structure, I want to talk about the last, but probably okay. We license computer science. There's a question related to the board. We license computer science curriculum to school districts, which are requiring patience as they sort out first order needs. So what is the best way to communicate that with a board? Great question. By the way, in my case, I find myself in a somewhat similar situation because we sell to chief information security officers, which happen to be the ones that are actually responsible for the COVID organization and coordination within their companies. So they're basically, don't talk to me for the next 3 months, right? How we are going to communicate that to the board? Well, in a very straightforward way, right? Nothing about the business change. They still need cybersecurity for their critical infrastructure networks. However, the project is on pause because the people that are supposed to be evaluating us are currently busy dealing with that response. So I think that it's perfectly okay to communicate that exactly in that way. Now, I'll talk in the next section about customers. What can you do to get an answer to kind of help with planning as to when they will be able to get out of that timeline, so that you can also adjust your timelines. But again, when it comes to communication to the board, always separate the market conditions from what you're doing, because you don't have control over the market conditions. So if the communication is, this is what the market is forcing our industry to do right now, this is kind of the baseline, and then what am I doing defensively and offensively to help extend my runway? Thank you for that question. That's a good one. Okay, so really the last couple of minutes I'll spend on customers and prospects. And so customers, again, here I'm focusing on the B2B enterprise model. First of all, acknowledge and have the compassion that whatever scale of crisis you're running in your startup, you can only imagine the scale of crisis in a large company, right? There's just so much more to do. There's so much more coordination to be done. So just really have the patience and have the compassion that they're dealing with a lot of other more urgent things. Now, that being said, there are a lot of things you can do proactively, and here actions really speak louder than words. So in the last couple of weeks, I've been seeing a lot of like social media posts from a lot of startups, you know, we're here for our customers, this and that, just like slogans, right? Slogans don't really do anything for the actual experience of the customer. So what you can do proactively is you can think through the bottlenecks of your current business model, and if there are any disruptions that you could anticipate because of the crisis. So for example, if you're a SaaS company, which probably a lot of you are, and you're hosting your infrastructure on AWS or something else, you know, what are the kind of things that you can anticipate? You know, do you have the right contracts in place to make sure you're not going to run out of compute space? Is your cloud infrastructure secure? Have you done an audit of that so you're not exposing your customers? You know, and this is just one example of the infrastructure, but really think through the bottlenecks of what you're providing to them. And if you notice that you can proactively improve something, do it. The customers absolutely will appreciate it. Also, for those of you that have business models that are a blend of a product/services, it makes sense to offer a little bit of those proactive services free of charge. You know, at the very basic, simple mode, it will be just increasing the time that your customer success folks are spending on the phone and just calling in and saying, hey, we noticed this and this in your usage. Again, very specific to whatever product you have, but We noticed this and this that we can optimize for you, or that we can improve free of charge for the next couple of months. Let us take care of that. Those kind of gestures, especially for large enterprise customers, they will go a very, very long way when the crisis is over, and they would have to continue, working with you, or even opportunities for upsell. So the crisis is also an opportunity to build relationships. So just think about, model your whole process of how the customer is using your software, or whatever other offering you have, even if it's a service offering, and just proactively think of how to address that. Now, when it comes to prospects, things get a lot trickier, right? And so the first thing is, and again, from my own experiences, understand that very little is actually under their control. So in my line of work, we work with a lot of the large enterprise customers that, once we get to like procurement and stuff like that, there's just a company-wide pause on purchasing, or something that even your champion of the account cannot impact. So for those kind of accounts, just acknowledge that. And in some cases, the best thing that you can do is just wait it out. However, for some other business models, you might actually be able to remove some of the friction points. So another thing that we've done is we've mapped out our sales journey, right? From an early lead to closing the deal. And we've said, okay, at what points of that process do we actually have control over the terms of the deal, over how we're delivering whatever proof of concept, proof of value. And one of the friction points for us, for example, was the fact that we were incentivizing our salespeople to sign up the clients on a 3-year contract, right? Because of the revenue recognition model. And so even though the customer would still pay on a yearly ARR subscription model, we were pushing our sales folks to make sure that they're signing 3-year deals, which, as you can imagine, in this climate is not working very well. So one of the things that we've done is we've completely eliminated that requirement. And so now we've given those customers the ability to just sign up on a month-to-month basis, which is really, for the large Fortune 500, like the Chevrons and the Pfizers of this world, this is just like kind of unheard of. But it gives great flexibility to our champions within the account to be able to move the account forward. That just one example. Again, it will be very specific on your sales process and where you can eliminate those friction points. But that'll be the one message that I want to leave you with, is like, think about friction points. And if you can afford it, like if it does not mean that your business is shutting down, if you give them that whatever concession, then work on eliminating the friction points. There were a couple of good questions relating to prospects, so I want to address those proactively, and then I'll talk a little bit about strategic partners, and then we can open it for more questions. So, but when it relates to prospect, there was a question about how do you drive deals forward in times of crisis without coming across as insensitive or brush? Great question. So I find myself on a daily basis in that situation. A CISO promised to move the deal to the next stage, and I'm not seeing the responses back. So what I've personally done is just be very transparent and ask for a timeline. Okay, we understand this is the situation. We understand this is what you guys are dealing with right now. Just to set expectation, do you think this is going to be a Q2, Q3, Q4 kind of deal? In most cases, they take that very positively. The second thing, and that just the basic communication. The second thing that we've done, which is the much more impactful thing, is again the example that I gave about eliminating friction. So thinking proactively through that process, and actually it will help the customer to move along from one stage to the other if you can proactively give them something that previous to that was a point of discussion or a point of negotiation. Okay. Another question that we had around prospects was, should you change your approach to cold emails now, meaning make them more sales oriented and more personal? In my experience, I don't think that cold emails work very well at all. So I've experienced that on myself as a prospect, especially as we were raising financing rounds. As soon as Crunchbase would announce it, we will see like 50 emails the next day selling me whatever, everything from like startup growth. I never bought anything from those emails, much less so even like opened them or read them, other than just looking for the company name. So that in my mind is not a good sales strategy. What I personally do and what we do at Claroty a lot more is I use one of the advanced features of LinkedIn called the Sales Navigator. And it's really a completely different interface to LinkedIn, but it allows you, it's a very rich context. It gives you information about everything around the prospect and also the company itself. So everything from like what news were there about the company, deeper information about the connection levels that you have with that prospect. It's not that expensive. I think it's like 50 or 60 bucks a month. I don't work for LinkedIn, so this is not an ad, but really I've used Sales Navigator for years now, and I'm really happy with it. It allows me to connect with people in context. So rather than this just being a cold email, it allows me to say, hey, we have this and this connection in common. And by the way, I was talking to your colleague about something else. So it just makes it a little bit more contextual. And I have had very good success with that. And one last question about prospects that we received also was, when is it a good time to actually reach out to new customers given the circumstances? What I've been doing for my own company is, first of all, think of segments of customers that will be much more open to the offering right now. So I'll give you an example. Our customers in oil and gas and electric utilities and manufacturing are either like completely shut down or manufacturing is shut down. So obviously we're not making that much progress there. However, data centers, which obviously are hosting a lot of the infrastructure right now, that business is booming. So we focused our attention over the last couple of weeks to contact more of the data center providers, which obviously now have a lot more strain on their infrastructure, and therefore cybersecurity is an even more important aspect for them. So think creatively about new segment of customers where in the past you were like, no, this is not a good segment because they're moving slow or whatever. Now that calculation might have changed. And a second point to that question is, I'm not a fan at all of the freemium model when it comes to enterprise sales, because again, if someone like Pfizer cannot afford a $100,000 deal ARR, then it's like, who can? So in general, especially if you're selling a very heavy B2B product, it's not a good idea to give it out for free because it just eliminates kind of all the perceived value. However, given the current situation and given the fact that procurement and finance of those large organizations are basically shut down, it might be a good idea to give them the product for free, especially if it's a SaaS kind of offering and deployment is not that complicated. Give it out for free for a month or 3 months, just because you're eliminating the legal and the contractual aspects, right? And then chances are there'll be appreciation for that gesture. And obviously, if you have a good product, chances are that there'll be stickiness after you kind of walk away from the account. So with that, I want to take a pause here and see if there are any questions related to that, and then maybe just also open it to questions. Everyone is shy, or they run out of questions, or I spoke for too long.
I also wanted to bring up, I think there were a couple of questions around strategic partnerships. I didn't know if we wanted to transition into that, but just around like how you think of strategic partnerships. People are saying, oh, yay, you have great perspectives, amazing suggestions, yeah. Very helpful.
Oh, good point. Good point, actually. I did have a section on that. So again, strategic relationships, I can only just share my own experiences. Strategic partnerships all come down to your specific line of business. So in my case, so the general idea is, if you're selling to large enterprises, chances are that your product, your offering, is one component into a much bigger play. And so if you think through what that bigger play is from the perspective of the customer, right? I know that we're all thinking like we all build amazing products and our products are the center of the universe, but actually our products are one very, very tiny, small piece of what the customer uses in a much big, broader context. So the example that I can give you from my own business is my startup creates the software that protects industrial networks. So when I think about it from the customer perspective, like from like a Chevron or any other kind of manufacturer, how they purchase and what they need to do is, first of all, they need to go and buy that automation infrastructure, and they buy that from the likes of like Rockwell, Schneider Electric, and Siemens, which all three of them, by the way, happen to be my strategic investors, which I'll also mention the benefits of having strategic investors. But in my case, my software was protecting the infrastructure of those other gigantic companies, right? So I spend a good portion of the first couple of years of the company making sure that I have strategic relationships with them, because again, I was giving them a piece of software and a component that they didn't have in their offerings. And so that made the go-to-market of both companies much stronger. Obviously, I gained a lot more as a small startup from $100 billion enterprise, but they also gained a lot of innovation that they couldn't do in-house. So in my case, it was my software runs on hardware networks, and I went and I made friends with the folks that are creating that hardware. In your cases, it will be very specific to whatever the business is. But if, for example, if you're an extension on top of Salesforce, you got to make friends with Salesforce, right? Or if you provide optimization on kind of HR hiring solutions, well, who are the three biggest kind of players in that domain, right? It's very, very specific to the industry. But it's very much worth spending the time to establish those relationships. And actually, I have a lot of examples. So my second round, my B round, was over $66 million, and vast majority of that money actually came from strategic investors that were either partners already in the go-to-market, or there were actually customers that were testing the product, and they liked the product so much that they actually wanted to involve their venture arm, which is another good point. If you happen to be selling to the large enterprises, almost every Fortune 500 company has a VC arm. And so if they're huge fans of what you're doing, it might be a really good idea to give them a little bit of the cap table in exchange for credibility, validation, and obviously, guess what? They talk to their other kind of friends in whatever vertical segment they are. So for example, the fact that one of our first customers was Coca-Cola, that helped a lot with getting a lot of the other food and bev companies because of amazing references. So strategic partners could also be strategic customers, and especially in those volatile times, especially if your sales cycle is disrupted, you might want to consider spending the time to develop some of those relationships. Of course, you need to be able to articulate what is it that they're gaining from that joint go-to-market. But chances are a lot of those large companies actually need innovative products. So as long as you can position it and show them the value, probably a lot of them will be open to having that discussion. And the benefit, obviously, of having strategic partners during those times of crisis is that they have much longer timelines and viewpoints. So just because there is a crisis now for the next 6 months or 9 months, large companies are not going to buy, for example, are not going to stop buying automation software, right? They might delay the purchasing by 6 months or so, but they'll continue to buy that. So as the small startup that is attached to a bigger offering, that just kind of gives you that flexibility and an opportunity to survive the hard times.
Great, that's super helpful. So should we open it up to conversation, questions, that sort of thing? Feel free to unmute, or you can leave your questions in the chat. I know it can be kind of intimidating leaving or talking on the full Zoom call, but whatever you have for Galina.
Yes, and there were some questions here also that I'm trying to read through earlier. Or there was another great one that was asked earlier, which was, what are the top 3 recommendations that you have for CEOs in these times to kind of, save their company, and just in general, the top 3 priorities? So Again, I'll tell you what we did over the last 1 month. The first one is just to be decisive and to cut deeper than you need. I think I spent some time talking about how important it is to overreact in those critical times rather than underreact. It's a great opportunity to make all the decisions, all the kind of riskier decisions that you've been putting off. You can always cut deeper and make the business healthier. So that'll be the first one. The second one will be, don't sugarcoat the message, especially to your employees. I mean, they're living in the same reality that everyone is. They know that the situation is going to be super, super bad for the months to come. So as long as you give them that perspective of market, we can really affect the market. We can affect the coronavirus, but let's focus collectively on the things that we can control, and just kind of keep on reminding them on a daily basis. That will also help with the morale, at least in my experiences. And the third one will be, I really do think that the best defense is offense, right? So once you've kind of done the defensive steps of what can we cut, take the time, once you're in that reflective state of mind, and once you have your own oxygen mask on, take the time to reflect, what are the opportunities that we have in this crisis, whether that's new segments, whether that's repackaging your product, whether that's, you know, I don't know, firing the bottom 15% of the organization because really they're not performing well, but you thought it's not appropriate to fire people in a growth market, or whatever it is, whatever are the actions that you need to take to make the company stronger. Those are the times to act decisively. Again, wrapping it up again with my first point, overreact to the current crisis, because that will just give you a bigger, a larger runway to execute on what you need to do, and also more confidence from your own team. Good. I'd love to hear also from you your stories. I mean, it doesn't have to be a question. I'm just kind of curious also how you guys are dealing with communicating to your employees. Are any of you fundraising? Have you decided to stop that? Just really would love to hear your perspectives as well.
Hi, Susanna Keith here. Hello, Career Guru. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So we've been out fundraising, and it was a wonderful experience thanks to All Raise's wonderful background. However, on what we're calling 3/11, we lost a couple investors due to the stock market and their portfolios. So now we're just going to bootstrap, and I would just love thoughts on creative ways to communicate to our users to get them to drive, to our platform more.
Mm-hmm. So first of all, this will probably make the business stronger in the long run. I think that we can all agree that companies the likes of WeWork, just because they've raised gazillions of billions of dollars, I don't even know what that number is. Those are not healthy businesses by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think that any of us want to have our names associated with anything like that. So one idea I'll suggest is, I don't know if I don't know how much money you're trying to raise, first of all. But if it's, less than 3 million, I think this is very doable through an angel round. Angels, I do angel investing myself. A lot of my friends do angel investing. I have not stopped. If anything, I'm like, I love it because all of the VCs are out of the picture right now. And so if you guys want to pitch me, I'm available, by the way. Sorry for the commercial break, but
oh, that'd be awesome. Let us know where.
but seriously, there are obviously a lot of amazing platforms like AngelList. So if you haven't looked into that, I really suggest it, because again, angels have just a different timeline, different kind of requirements. We're our own LPs, so we don't have to worry about the markets as much. But this is very normal, and all I'm hearing, again, what I'm hearing from my VC friends is that at best, things are paused. Very, very few deals are going to go through. I mean, and those deals will probably take, the ones that are getting signed, they'll probably take a cut in the valuation of at least 30%. So it's better to wait.
So I'm Jules Kotkela, founder and CEO of Cheeky. I'm a wellness and smart wearables company. And so we have hardware. And how I've actually pivoted is I've actually created a new free software, which is part of our app, that will actually tell people if they have respiratory impairment or lung failure for the COVID-19. So I've kind of taken the approach of just kind of pivoting heavily, still selling, of course, our product, which does all of these things too, but giving the rest of the people out there globally the ability to monitor themselves without having to actually buy our items. And
That's
so
an
I'm still
amazing pivot.
fundraising.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's an amazing pivot, just kind of taking advantage of the market conditions right now. So well done.
Thanks. It's I forgot how much easier software is than hardware.
Yeah, exactly. Good. Any other experiences? Would love to hear what stage you guys are at, and also any other advice that you have to share with the group.
I'm Camilla Olson with Sabitude, and we had been we had AI recommendation in e-commerce, and there's hundreds of people there. So we've developed product for AI design, so we can create new designs, solve the problem in the design studio. Just as we were going to market to that, this happened, and we realized that we can actually redesign the excess inventory. So we're pivoting to get rid of all of this excess inventory, which designers don't want to touch, but our software doesn't have an attitude. So, it'll do what we tell it to do. So that's our pivot. And so far we're getting some good attention. That's good. But as far as our team, we've started doing we're remote. We're all, in different states. And so we've instituted every morning at 8:30, we do a call in and do a stand-up meeting, but the first 5 minutes is all social. And catch up on good TV shows and movies.
Yeah.
That sort
How
of
are
thing.
you as the
How
exactly.
are you?
How are
Yeah,
you?
yeah,
How are
yeah.
you surviving this? Compassion is really needed in those times.
And authenticity, like how are you really feeling,
Yeah.
So, and that's been really good, bringing the team together, and so far so good. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Camilla. Great pivots, by the way.
Thank you. Well, I'll follow up with you.
Thank you. Anyone else fundraising during those times, or any other advice that you can share that has worked for you?
So I'm still fundraising, right? We started, I've been bootstrapped to date, and I'm still having conversations with investors. I think it's kind of like housing. My mom always told me, right, that even in December and by Christmas, there are still people that buy houses.
Right.
So you can't ignore that. I think, recession is a really interesting, thing that happens that really makes people identify and make sure with clarity that their business model is working and that the challenges that they're trying to face and address, that's doable. So I think that it really just all depends on the fit, and there's still people out there that have money that are willing to invest. I think it's great, the idea of going to maybe the angel group, depending on the amount of money that you're trying to raise. And it's showing that, you take into consideration the economic events and how you're parlaying that into something that can be bigger than what you already have.
Yeah, great point, by the way, on the recession kind of being a really good test for the product market fit of your product. Because think of it as this way, it's like if you cannot make it through these times with the current business model, that's just an amazing sign that you should not waste another 2 years of your life. And let's be honest, the markets were just like, we probably still are in a bubble. There was just capital thrown at all kinds of crazy companies. I mean, some of the companies that are being pitched to me are like, I'm like, you guys are not even a feature, let alone a company, right? But because when everyone sees like every company being funded, not every company should be funded. So I think this is just a great opportunity to just kind of pivot and find the one thing that really does work.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and there's a another comment here also from Christine that they closed their seed round. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's a good point as well. Smaller rounds also.
If I could add, yesterday I was on a call put together by FT Partners. I know there were 7,000 people on the call, mostly venture capitalists. And it was probably the best, investment relating VC investor related call that I've been on. And it had some really good advice. And one of the things they talked about it, because there were venture capitalists who'd been through the 97 and the .com and the '08 crashes, said that venture capitalists are investing, but it's the approach. It's how you deal with them right now.
Right.
But a lot of the rounds are internal, but they'll want one person, and it's like, you go to them and say, hey, you're my friend. And here's what's really going on. But that authenticity is really important, but you can't go to them the way you used to go to them.
Yeah.
It's not that you go right now. It's really truthful, transparency. And that was really important. And so humility is really important right now, and transparency.
Yeah. As my security friends, I was just on a call with like probably, I don't know, 70 CISOs yesterday, and one of my friends said, our infrastructure will break, but people will also break, and so we gotta be very mindful of that, because our teams is what's driving the success. I'm just kind of curious, especially around like motivating the teams. Do you guys have any other suggestions of something that has worked for you around productivity? Because I'm in the same boat. I mean, with 200 people around the world, it's just kind of, it's a challenge.
I think there's different motivators, like ways to actually motivate individuals, and it's not just one size fits all. I think there's different groups and personae that you have to take a look at in terms of from like working parents versus people who are single, and there's different things that people are literally looking for, right? Remote doesn't work for everybody, but that's kind of the situation that we're all in. I think as a parent, I really enjoy being able to slice up my day differently, and I allow people and I give them a lot of autonomy with that to, hey, if you're working from 10 to 2 or from, 6 to 10 or whatever those hours are that work for you, just that the team is kept in the loop of what those hours are. So just keeping a very nice structured an awareness for everybody, so that you don't have to play like mean mommy with policing.
Right. Yeah.
Also very clear and set deliverables with what we're trying to do, as well as what does that mean in terms of input or output, right? What was the impact that they're actually contributing to, and how can we really create those OKRs to realign? So it's not just about making a sale or increasing, retention of this or that. What other things are out there that we can really incorporate that will give people a sense of ownership and accomplishment?
Yeah. Have any of you guys started making cuts? I mean, I assume everyone has frozen hiring, but have you started to lay off people as well?
I haven't laid off anybody. I have a really small, lean team though from the get-go, and I've supplemented originally with contractors that I was going to hire for in the next year as full-time employees. So what I've done is just delay that, extended the contracts with the contractors, and will refocus on the FTEs once we're in a little bit of a different position in the next 6 months.
Yeah, well, our team is so lean. There's nothing to cut, and we're paying our engineers $40,000.
Oh wow, that's a really good price.
Not much.
That's really, yeah.
They're in Ann Arbor, but I sent care packages to last weekend. Our fashion architect has a single mom now, and her son build things out of boxes, and we had a bunch of stuff delivered. So we packed
very thoughtful.
Packed up all, so thoughtful things to people.
Yeah. Yeah, for those companies, I mean, I don't know if any of you here on the call have teams that are companies that are more than like 40, 50 people. But at that size, there's always, as you hire, especially if you're hiring fast, there are always some people at the end of the day that are not carrying their weight. And so it's always a good thing to kind of look at the underperformance, and now is the perfect kind of timing to let those people go. Another thing that a lot of the executives have done in many of the startups is just a significant pay cuts, right? Especially to the executives, and in some cases also to the employees. So again, it depends on what industry that you're on, but most people would prefer to take a pay cut than to be laid off. So.
Oh, thank you, Galina. We're at 1 o'clock now, but thank you again. This has been so helpful. I know I learned a lot. I'm not running a business, but I think everyone else on the call must have learned a lot as well. So thank you again for attending. Thank you, Galina, for sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you so much for your comments, and feel free to get in touch if you want to chat some more. You guys can find me on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Great.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great
Bye.
weekend, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye.
Katie.
Bye.
Thank you for organizing.